It's my privilege, first of all, my name is Henry Coe. I am associated with a volunteer group called DUMP, Don't Undermine Memphremagog's Purity. And this phrase was coined actually by a Vermont legislator, Sam Young, who came to our first meeting actually in late June following the first public hearing on when we all learned about the expansion application of the landfill. We're a completely volunteer group. There's no paid staff, but we put in hundreds of hours, because thousands of hours, truly, in this last year and a half, because we are we're trying to be conscientious and thorough. And today, following the settlement of an appeal of a permit decision, which DUMP filed an appeal on saying we think that this was the wrong decision, we reached a mediation accord and agreed to settle. And ever since then, I think everyone, at least for myself, my heart is more calm. I think it was a bittersweet decision for both sides, perhaps, but I think the mediator who guided us really came out on a positive note. I'm wondering, if you don't mind, you will appreciate it if I just read my short remarks, because otherwise I get going. Our goal has been to raise the level of public awareness of the impact of Vermont's only permitted and expanding landfill on the people and the environment of our border watershed area. Our purpose today is to allow legislators and regulators from both sides of our border to listen, to question, and to give input into our common goal of the necessity of protecting the quality of the waters of Lake Memphremagog to the perpetual benefit of the people and the plant and animal life that depend upon it. People have asked me, well, what got you started on this? And my answer really, and I'll tell you, is simple. I used to dump my trash once a week in the old private unlined landfill called Charlie Davis dump. And there may be people in the room almost as old as I who remember doing so. One day, I watched Charlie group our trash and garbage. And in that day, in 1970, he didn't even have hydraulics on his old bulldozer. He had the old cable system. And he grouped it, and then he pushed it. And I remember seeing some cattails then, and my trash landing in a wetland. And I rode home that day in my empty pickup, and I said, I'm helping poison that river. And that was the last I ever used this landfill. And the location today is the same location. And one of my colleagues informed me this morning that in her research, the EPA itself, Environmental Protection Agency of the federal government, has revised its criteria for the siting of a landfill. And the number one and first criteria is location. And it rules that a location next to a wetland or in a floodplain or by a water source is not the preferred location. This is how we came into it. The second reason I'm here today is I'm thinking of my 6-year-old granddaughter and the wonder in her eyes. And I'm an old man. And we who gather here need to think of those who follow us. We've got a fragile and shrinking planet, and it's worth putting all our effort into it. It could be costly, it should be costly to protect our water. We have to be willing to try to make that investment. I'm wandering again, and I apologize. A couple of ground rules. You should have an agenda in front of you. I was neglectful and didn't put the times. That's too tedious. We'll try to keep track of time, but we ask just to respect that after introductions and after our guest speaker, her opening remarks and words and a couple of other invited guests, there will be almost an hour of open discussion. And that can come questions from the audience as well as the table members. Thank you so much for coming. It's been it's really, it's heartening to all of us who work so hard. Remember, our purpose is to raise public awareness, to get input and help from the legislators. And our effort and intent is to work properly with regulators, the landfill, going forward. The legal aspect is fortunately behind us. With that, I'd like to go around the room at least on the table and have people self-introduce themselves. There are too many here, I don't remember all of your names. And how do we begin?
I'm Julie Warren. I'm the Secretary of the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources.
Hello everyone, I'm Chuck Schwer. I'm the Director of our Waste Management and Prevention Division, which is part of the Department of Environmental Conservation for Vermont.
Jordan Coop, Assistant to Member of Parliament for NEK-TV.
I'm Elizabeth, Member of Parliament for Sherbrooke.
Good morning, I'm Jackie Bello. I'm the Director of the Writing Office for the Member of Parliament in Micro-Evo. She's also the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food for Canada.
Representative Vicki Strong in the Legislature, and from Albany, Vermont.
Karen Godbout, Councillor Municipal from Sherbrooke.
Michel Cyr, Service of Infrastructure Government in Sherbrooke.
Colleen Morley Ortiz, I am a registered nurse with the Vermont Department of Health.
Michel Marcoux, I'm the Mayor of Pontic Township on the Memphremagog Health.
Lisette Maillet, I'm Mayor of Austin and Chair of the Sustainable Development Committee of the MRC Memphremagog.
Francine Caron-Marco, Mayor of Canton de Stansted.
David Lordinado, Environmental Project Coordinator at the MRC Memphremagog.
Lynn Bissett, UMP for Brown-Missisquoi.
Karina Pomperino, Assistant for Lynn Bissett.
Michael Sutlow, Councillor, Municipality of Ogden and Lake Memphremagog, and former Mayor of Ogden.
Jean-Pierre Fortier, Water Management Division Chief from the City of Sherbrooke.
Suzanne Couillot, I'm the Environmental Coordinator for the City of Niagara.
Tom Barry, I work for U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy.
Vicki Mayhem, I'm the Mayor of the City of Magog.
Jean Denis, Sainte-Catherine qui préfère l'MRC Memphremagog.
Gilles Bélanger, Member of National Assembly of Quebec, and I'm also representing Quebec on the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus and also the Eastern Regional Council of the United States.
Alexandre Roy, I'm the Assistant for Indonesian Development.
My name is Brian Smith. I with the Derby Select Board and I'm State Representative representing towns of Derby, Morgan, Charleston, Hall, and Brownington.
Steve Barrett, Supervisor Waste District, Newport Town, also Chair of the Select Board.
Lynn Baxter, I am the counterpart for Ryan. I am a representative representing the Northeast Kingdom.
Representative Woodland Page, I represent Newport, Newport Center, portion of North Troy, Coventry, and Irisburg.
And I'm Representative Mark Higby. I represent Lowell, Jay, Westfield, Troy, and Eden.
Robert Benoit, Président du Memphremagog Conservation.
Enrico, Member of DUM.
Teresa Duray, Member of DUM.
Thank you very much.
I'll
be glad to, if you can just state your name and your affiliation.
Yeah, so I'm Ben Copan, also the agency of Natural Resources, Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Watershed Planner covering Lake Memphremagog.
Robin Smith, Orleans County Record.
Steve Blake, Sherbrooke Record.
Jillian Staniforth, Member of DUM.
Chris Jacobs, Albany Selectman, Albany, Vermont, and Member of DUM. Carol O'Connell, Member of DUM.
John Casella, Casella Waste Systems.
Jeff Weld, Casella.
Joseph Esco, Casella. Kevin Roy, Casella Waste.
Sam Nicolai, Engineering for Casella.
I'm our news reporter out of Sherbrooke. Jean-François News.
Senate, TV Sherbrooke.
And let's report done.
Gisèle Lacasse, Memphremagog Conservation. Jennifer Hopkins, MWA, Treasurer.
Stephen Poulis, NWA. Paul Stone, NEK-TV.
Ariane Norgic, Memphremagog Conservation.
Rainey Codnor, member of DUM.
Jeremy Levy from Casella.
Tom Bernier, City Newport Public Works. Joe Gay, engineer for Casella and the landfill.
Jean Harel de Radio-Canada Sherbrooke. Barber, Newport Daily Express.
Danny Jean, de la Fleet de la Canada.
Lindy Sargent, member of DUM.
Jean-François Gagnon, La Tribune, Sherbrooke.
Essie Brown, member of DUM.
Peggy Stevens from Charleston, member of DUM.
Joseph Mercer, reporter for the Chronicle. Representative Paul LaFave from Newark. I represent most towns in Essex County.
State Representative Mike Marcotte, and also Chair of the Coventry Select Board.
Thank you. I have an apology. It's a faux pas I made. Before I began my remarks, I meant to introduce Representative Michael Marcotte, a native of Newport, born in Newport, and currently chair of the Coventry Select Board. He represents both Newport and Coventry and wishes to just welcome you today.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, welcome everyone today. I think it's really important that we get together. I thank DUMP for facilitating this. I think it's really important for us to understand what we need to do both on the American side and the Canadian side to protect Lake Memphremagog. And so I am a state representative. I'm the chair of the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee in Montpelier. And I also chair the select board for the town of Coventry where the landfill is sited. So again, I welcome my colleagues from Montpelier, from here representing our region in Montpelier. And I welcome our colleagues on the Quebec side who represent their towns and municipalities in Parliament in Quebec City. I hope that this will be a very robust and positive discussion that's had today. I'm sorry to say that I can't stay because on Mondays, when I'm not in the legislature, I have to work. And so I was able to break away for a little bit, come and just say hello, but I will have to be leaving. But again, welcome. Thank you for coming down, and let's hope this is a good start to a positive endeavor for both of our countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Well said. Here, here. I am privileged today to welcome our guest speaker, our Commissioner of Agency of Natural Resources, the Secretary of our Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Julie Moore. This is the first morning we've actually met. However, we have communicated, and I'll get to that in a minute. Julie comes with a strong academic background, having majored in civil engineering as an undergraduate, and she has an MS in environmental science and public policy from Johns Hopkins. That's a fine university. She also has a very long and in-depth background, having worked in watershed planning in Vermont, with a lot of her energy has been focused on the Lake Champlain watershed. I could go on and on about her accomplishments. What I really recognize and want to tell you, as busy as she is, trying to administer one of the most difficult agencies in state government, this is a lady willing to listen. It's an uncommon quality. She listened to me. I was intemperate in my letter following the decision to expand the landfill. I regretted sending the letter, and I immediately regretted it and apologized. This lady, who I have never met and who never met me, was patient. She listened. She kept the communication door open. I'll always remember that. This is a very gracious woman, and I'm proud to be here.
Good morning. Thanks to all of you for making time to be here this morning, and I look forward to what I hope will be a very productive dialogue. I actually wanted to start on communication lines, and I think that there has been a lot of work by many of the folks in this room engaged in ensuring that there are open and robust lines of communication regarding the landfill facility, and also the larger body of work that the agency's engaged in surrounding Lake Memphremagog. And so pleased to have both Chuck and Ben here this morning as technical experts in those respective areas, to listen, to hear your concerns, and to the extent possible to be able to respond to some of them. As you know, one of the big pieces of work related to the agency's mission is monitoring, and that takes several different forms in the Memphremagog watershed. It includes significant monitoring around the landfill facility, both the lined portions and the unlined portions, which you spoke of, Henry, ensuring that any contaminants associated with that facility don't migrate off-site, and that the liners and all of the protective measures and systems that are in place at the landfill are intact and working as intentioned. We also do a significant amount of work with the quality of the major tributaries to Lake Memphremagog, as well as the lake itself. We have what we call a basin planning process, where we comprehensively evaluate each of the major tributaries throughout the state of Vermont. We consider this one to be basin 15? 17? Close. Basin 17. And that plan was last updated in 2017, so just 2 years ago. We know that Lake Memphremagog has challenges associated with nutrient pollution, not all that dissimilar from some of the water quality challenges faced in Lake Champlain, and that there are concerns about harmful algal blooms and the impact that those blooms can have on recreation and drinking water quality. And so there's a number of different ways and spaces in which the agency engages in this watershed. We have a very strong partner with the Memphremagog Watershed Association in doing some of this work related to the nutrient pollution concerns in Lake Memphremagog, and a strong partner in Casella in working to ensure that the landfill facility doesn't have an undue adverse impact. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I look forward to hearing from all of you about your vision in terms of the future and next steps. I think the permitted facility is at this point, it's on the books, and we'll be working to manage through all of that with all of you. But would like to understand better how you see, or how you would define success in terms of protecting Memphremagog's water quality, because that's certainly a mission and a goal we all share at the Agency of Natural Resources. So again, thank you for having me this morning, and I look forward to being part of this discussion.
Great.
Thank you, Secretary Moore. I would now like to, I have not met her, but to welcome Madam Mayor of Magog, Vicki May Ham.
I'm here.
And if you could come forward, Vicki, I'd like you to speak from the mayor's seat. And I understand Mayor Ham will also be speaking on behalf of, I think, 8 other mayors of municipalities around the Canadian side of Lake Memphremagog. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm a little bit shocked to see my name on the agenda. I thought we were going to do this when we were presenting ourselves, so I didn't really prepare a presentation, but, and I will do it in English and in French because I have a lot of French colleagues around the table, et il y a beaucoup de médias francophones aussi dans la salle, donc je le ferai dans les deux langues si vous permettez. Good for you? Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here on part of the MRC, and I think the first thing I would like to say is the MRC has been involved for over 20 years. I will not go into any technical or details, but we do have people around the table that can, if necessary. And I'm really happy to see around the table elected officials, not only from municipalities, but also from the province and from the federal government, because that's very important. It is an issue that touches much more than municipalities, and I must say 20 years ago, we did find we were quite alone fighting it. And we can see that it's a little bit different today, so I'm happy to see that. Donc, on m'a demandé de vous partager un peu nos principales préoccupations par rapport au site d'enfouissement et au lac Memphremagog. Je pense que la principale préoccupation dont vous avez beaucoup entendu parler dans les médias, c'est vraiment le fait que le lac Memphremagog, pour nous, c'est un bassin d'eau potable qui dessert à peu près 175 000 personnes en eau potable. Donc, pour nous, il n'y a aucun risque à prendre par rapport au traitement du lithium dans ce réservoir d'eau potable. So, in English, one of our major preoccupations, and I know you've read this in the media also, is the impact of the landfill, the leachate that has been treated. Because Lake Memphremagog is, for us, our drinking water for over 175,000 people. So it's very important for us. And even though there are norms and regulations, there are many chemicals that are not yet regulated and that we do not know what impact they could have on the environment and on its full ecosystem. So that's one of our major preoccupations. Aussi, on croit qu'il est très important d'évaluer et de mettre en place toutes les mesures nécessaires pour prévenir la migration justement de ces contaminants vers la rivière Black, dans le lac Memphremagog, qui proviennent entre autres des cellules qui sont sans membrane. So we also believe that it's very important to put in place the necessary measures to prevent the migration of these contaminants that, like I said, we don't know the impact of all of them. They go directly into our lake because there are some cells that are unlined. Enfin, de mettre en place des fonds post-fermeture qui pourraient être utilisés après la période de post-fermeture de 30 ans pour mettre en place des mesures d'atténuation des éventuels dommages qui pourraient être causés par le site d'enfouissement. And that has also been discussed. I think we've been discussing that for over 20 years. N'est-ce pas, Alexandra? So to put in place sufficient funding to protect against the post-closure and post-closure in case of necessity. So my colleagues are here if there's any questions. Like I said, I didn't expect to be on the agenda. So if there's anything else, I have a whole team here from Quebec that can answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ham. It's incredible, isn't it, to see our Quebec colleagues so completely bilingual without having to go back and forth. I wish I had that quality, or taken the time to do that. I know we've self-introduced, but before we go on to our next period of time in the agenda, I'd just like to recognize as well Attaché Jacqueline Belleau, who is representing in her absence Madame Ledoux, Minister of Agriculture in the Trudeau government in Ottawa and parliamentarian from Stansted. Imagine, we have right here in Stansted the parliamentarian minister for the Department of Agriculture for the whole country of Canada. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to introduce Ottawa parliamentarians Elizabeth Breyer, Len Bessette, representative to the National Assembly in Quebec City, Gilles Belanger, I see you, Gilles. Jacques Lemaire, prefect of the MRC, or Memphremagog Council of Governments, I prefer to call it. It's a group of all the governments surrounding Memphremagog who get together periodically, and as you just heard, have been fighting for improved water quality and an assurance of good drinking water quality in the lake for over 20 years. Lisette Maillet, Mayor of Austin and longtime fighter for the Memphremagog environment, and I was privileged to meet Lisette about a year ago. Are you here, Lisette? Yes. Orleans County representatives. I think, I have not seen, is it Bobby Starr? Are you here, Senator Starr? It was in his intention. And likewise, John Rogers, our other Orleans senator. And I've seen and met a number of the Vermont representatives. Welcome, Representative LaFave, Representative Strong, Page, who I have not met prior. Mike Marcotte, who gave the welcome, Bachelor, and Representative Smith from Derby Line. Oh, Robert Starr, I just thank you for coming. We appreciate your presence.
Thank you.
And Representative.
I'm sorry, it's right here on my list. From Lowell, Representative Higley, who represents a number of towns. What, North Troy?
Troy?
Yeah. Welcome. Okay, we're getting along and we're within our time frame. I would like now, please, to introduce our friend and colleague and longtime fighter for the conservation of the Memphremagog Lake and Watershed. I have to be short and abridge my introduction. This is a fine environmentalist. He represents, and his volunteer president has never taken a penny, the Memphremagog Conservation Incorporated organization is based in Magog, but represents all the communities around the lake. And I went up to see him one day, and we just visited and talked, and he encouraged us to raise our voice, become active. And his organization, I found later, is the oldest conservation program, nonprofit program in the whole province of Quebec. It has a 50-year history, probably 51 at this point. My pleasure to introduce and welcome Robert Benoit.
Thank you, Madam Moore, merci beaucoup d'être ici aujourd'hui. It's very impressive to get all these politicians together from both sides of the state. I don't think we had a meeting like that for many, many years. That be social, economic, and the first time we have so many politicians together here in Newport, it's about environment. And that's quite a day. I hope we take a picture of that, and we all remember that this day we hope to change history. Harry Truman, ex-president of the United States, once said that the buck stopped here, and he stopped the war. He had to make a very difficult decision. There was a war, it was not easy, and he stopped the war. There is a problem with that garbage site, and we will leave other experts to talk about it. But as citizens of the Canadian side of the border, my children drinking that water, people at the hospital using it, we don't want leachate coming in this lake from a garbage site. There is high level of pollution coming, and we don't want it. The message of DOM MCI is very clear. Not one drop of leachate on that lake. We did negotiate, and we got a four years moratoire. That's great. But why we are here together is to make sure that in 4 years that moratoire stay on, and there is no leachate coming from that garbage site on Lake Memphremagog. I hope that this school is very clear. People of Quebec will get together after. They're having a lunch. We, as DOM and MCI, we didn't want to be there. We want the politicians to do their thing, and we can do our thing eventually. But being in a federation, a Canadian federation, is the same in the United States. It's beautiful, but it's complicated. There's 3 levels of government: federal, international affairs, provincial, and municipal, and MRC. So when I go to the MRC, it say, well, it should be the province. When I go to the province, it should be the federal government. So let's all get together, politicians from Quebec. And if one of you missed that meeting, we're not going to let you cross the border back in Canada. And it's very easy to do. So we want you to be there with Jacques and Lisette and settle one for all who is going to handle that dossier in the next few years. We did our share. We stopped leaching the lake for 4 years. Now it is your job to take over. I will finish by the word of Robert Bourassa, ex-Prime Minister of Quebec. Monsieur Bourassa disait toujours que quand il rentrait dans son bureau, il y avait 200 feux sur son bureau à tous les matins. Vous, politiciens du Québec, des États-Unis, vous avez 200 feux sur votre bureau à tous les jours. Vous essayez d'en éteindre quelques-uns. Ce qu'on vous dit aujourd'hui, on va vous en mettre un 200e, feu sur votre bureau. C'est votre job maintenant de le mettre avec toutes vos autres préoccupations. Vous n'êtes pas juste des spectateurs de ce qui se passe, vous êtes maintenant des acteurs dans ce qui se passe dans Coventry. So, thank you very much. I'm very impressed. Everybody we expect to be here is here. Everybody without exception. Let me tell you, to work in environment stuff, to get 15 politicians here, it's very tough. That I can assure you that. Thank you to be here. We have a job to do. We will leave Teresa and other people, and please very welcome to say what you have to say this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend Robert, and we are friends. It's been great. You know, it's difficult in old age to meet and make new solid friends. I think you're 70, you just passed 75, and I'll be headed to 80 next year. And we feel like brothers. I want to introduce to you Larry Gluckman from Glover, Vermont, who has been loyal and wise, I will say that. He seems to bring wisdom to our meetings and has participated with us, always in a positive spirit. He will give a couple of framing remarks and then introduce Teresa Charade, who we are very privileged to have as a member with her talents in data analysis and collection and interpretation. She has some very interesting graphics to show, which will raise the educational level of all of us, I hope. Without further ado, Larry Gluckman, right here. Thanks, Larry.
I'm going to read my remarks so I don't wander. The information we will present today was provided by Casella Waste Systems and the Agency of Natural Resources. Over the last month, representatives from the Department of Environmental Conservation have graciously spent time with us in Newport and in their offices in Montpelier. And today we have Secretary Moore, which is an indication of her agency's commitment to the healthy environment and in particular, the Lake Memphremagog watershed. A landfill, in a sense, is a living system. We all provide the waste, and Mother Nature helps it deteriorate, and the byproduct of the process is leachate. Some refer to it as garbage juice. It is the management of leachate and its contaminants that is the challenge. It was the closing of other lined landfills and unlined landfills that brings us to Coventry, managed by News Vermont, near the shores of Lake Memphremagog. And although many of us oppose the location and its expansion, the reality is now we must be vigilant, conduct extensive oversight, use precautionary principles and current science when the decisions must be made, and by all means do not fall prey to what Margaret Heffernan refers to in her TED Talk as willful blindness. And if somebody isn't sure what that is, I encourage you to go on YouTube and listen to Margaret Heffernan. It's only 14 minutes and it might change your perspective. We are all mindful of the sacrifices that the residents of Newport have made financially with the temporary order preventing leachate from being processed at their water treatment facility. It is our hope that in the very near future, all the stakeholders will come together to plan and implement new and innovative solid waste management practices so leachate and its byproducts will no longer be an issue. Now I'd like to introduce Teresa. She is one of the ladies on our steering committee. She is a statistician, a documentarian, a visual arts creator, a computer scientist, and has used all of those skills to better understand the science of landfill management. Teresa.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, I've got a lot to live up to there with that introduction. One of my heroes is Greta Thunberg, the young environmental activist who has been having awareness sessions called Fridays for the Future. I would like to think of this as a Monday for Memphremagog. Thank you all for coming. We have the map of Memphremagog. I'm not sure how many of you have seen it and how much of it goes up into Canada. Here we have the location of the landfill and the location of the Newport water treatment facility. Just for your reference. This is a brief timeline. I'm not going to read every word. Just know that in June of 2018 was the first and only public input for the expansion of the landfill. That's how some of our members first got it in their minds that maybe we wanted to oppose this. I think Henry was there. Through the summer, there was some planning and a public awareness forum that was held in Newport. I think about 130 people showed up for that. In October of 2018, the Agency of Natural Resources approved the expansion of the landfill. And that same month, our group dump appealed that decision. We went through some legal discovery process in January. Actually, there was an Act 250 hearing, and they went away to make their decision. And all through the summer, we had documentation to look through that was provided through the discovery process. In July, the Act 250 ruled in favor of the expansion, but with two important conditions. One was this no leachate treated within Memphremagog watershed unless proven safe, so it was an amendable condition. And two, that an odor monitor must be hired, a person, to monitor, investigate, and respond to odors and to inspect for non-conforming waste. In November, we met through a mediation process with representatives from the landfill, News VT, Casella, and we came to an agreement. The expansion would go on, but these would be the conditions that we would see. Again, we wanted to make sure that no leachate would be treated within the Memphremagog watershed unless the surface water standard had been established and shown that it was safe. And it is on the Agency of Natural Resource website that date is January 1st, 2024, when that surface water standard will be made. Because the landfill folks are engaging a third party to do a study of the odor management, and DUMP is able to participate in the selection of the study company and the scope of that study. So we have been working with them on that. Also, the folks at the landfill must supply our group DUMP with all the reports, the monthly monitoring reports that they produce, and there are many, believe me. They will provide them also to DUMP as well as the Agency of Natural Resource. So we will be able to look at all of that data on a continuing basis. Last, we will have a representative of our DUMP group, Pam Latz, will be sitting on the Landfill Oversight Committee. So that's just a brief timeline. This is all in your handouts. This first slide, we're talking about the acres of the landfill, the lined landfill. So it started out 6.8 acres. And as you can see through the blue lines, that is now the total acreage. It's a dramatic increase. It's a staggering size if you think about it. I was encouraged to let you know that if you ever have a chance to fly over it, you'll really be able to see the impact it has. It's huge. This slide is showing the amount of wetland and buffer areas that have been negatively impacted by land use variances that are granted. There are rules about the landfill in place and certain buffer distances from wetlands, and there have been variances granted, so certain work can be done on the landfill. And this is just showing the acres of that. Wetlands, in looking at the EPA website, wetlands are comparable to rainforests and coral reefs. On the USDA website, they state that half of all bird species in North America use wetlands for feeding or resting, and a third of all plant species are hosted in the wetlands. Wetlands are important. We have to treat them better than we have been. This is a graph to show the total tonnage that they have been putting into the landfill on a yearly basis for the last 5 years. 2019 estimate is because we didn't have the fourth quarter numbers yet, and so we averaged the first 3 quarters and made that be the fourth quarter value. But what this graph also shows, I know it's a little complicated maybe, but the blue lines show the percent of that tonnage that comes from out of state. The Vermonters are doing well in trying to recycle, trying to do the right thing, but it's made up by out-of-state waste. It is not municipal trash that comes from out of state, but it is waste that does go in the landfill. This graph is showing a list of the odor complaints. When someone smells the landfill, there's a hotline they can call at the landfill to complain of an odor. And there is also a process that they can file a complaint with the Agency of Natural Resources. So this graph shows the different complaints that have been received over this time frame. Odor is air pollution, and some of it is a health risk. Now, I can't quantify what these odor complaints were, but we do know that landfills have odors, and some of those odors can be a health risk. Now this wonderful word leachate, everyone's talking about leachate. This is the EPA's definition of leachate for landfills, formed when rainwater filters through wastes placed in a landfill. When this liquid comes in contact with buried waste, it leaches or draws out chemicals or constituents from those wastes. We know now that there are chemicals in that leachate which are not healthy. They're a health risk. And the challenge is to dealing with that leachate. The leachate has to be collected. It has to be put somewhere so that it can then be trucked off and disposed somewhere. And what you find out about these chemicals is there's really no good place to put them. So that's a dilemma we're all dealing with, and it's an evolving concern. This chart shows the number of gallons in each month. The highest monthly value that went to the Montpelier wastewater treatment facility. The wastewater treatment facility is permitted to take 23,000 gallons per day. And there is an exception. They can go over that amount if they test for the biochemical oxygen demand. The biochemical oxygen demand is a tool they use to make sure that they are going to be able to handle that organic waste. And I'm sure they're checking that, but it doesn't ensure that they can keep those toxic PFAS chemicals and other toxic chemicals. The biochemical oxygen demand does not help us in those areas. So this is a lot of gallons to go into the Winooski River that then travels to Lake Champlain. And I know Lake Champlain is a concern. I think this would be concerning as well, going into Lake Champlain. This is another chart just to show the number of days that actually were over that permitted value is greater than the number of days that were within the permitted value. So that's, again, a lot of leachate going to Montpelier. And now that Newport is not taking it, thank goodness for Lake Memphremagog and the Watershed, there's even more that has to go somewhere, you know? These are the gallons of leachate that were delivered to various wastewater treatment facilities from that landfill. And again, you can see the trend is up. Keep in mind, this is before the expansion. We're talking about a big expansion, which is going to take more waste. And this leachate, even after a landfill is closed, it continues to produce leachate for years and years after it is closed. We will be dealing with leachate probably for many of our lifetimes in this room, frankly. This is leachate reported in the secondary liner. The landfill is a modern landfill, and it has a primary liner, and the leachate collects at the bottom and is pumped out to the holding tanks. But underneath that primary liner is a secondary liner. And you don't really want any in there. It's a fail-safe though, thank goodness, right? And these are the numbers of gallons over that 5-year period that have collected in that secondary liner for whatever reason. And I'm sure there are reasons. I mean, there might be a construction that makes it a dig in the liner, or water gets in from some outside source, or it covers off for a little while. I'm sure there are reasons, but that's a lot of gallons that could be in that secondary liner. And if that secondary liner has a fault, then we're in the ground. The leachate is in the ground. So here's just the last graph to show we're currently at about 76.9 acres. And after the expansion, we're going to be at 128.1 acres, a 66% increase. What will the impact be? We need to be vigilant and monitor and make sure we are being careful with our watershed and our Lake Memphremagog. We now can open this up to any questions or discussion. If there's anything you would like more information on, I'm sure there's somebody in this room that could probably answer it. Yes?
I do have a question. In the landfills in Quebec, do they produce leachate?
Every landfill produces.
Where does it go in Quebec?
I do not know. Anyone here know?
No leachate in Quebec go in the lake. No leachate go in the lake.
Where does it go?
They go in the river. River, there is dilution of leachate. In the lake, there's bioaccumulation. A drop from Newport will cross the border in Magog 2 years after. So that all the chemical on that water will go to the bottom and stay there. And as soon as you stir the water again, it gets back in life. So that's a big difference between Quebec and Vermont. Leachate in Quebec don't go in the lake, they get diluted in a river.
But it still goes into a river.
It's not going in the river. But we're not here to settle the Quebec problem.
No,
I know
well-
Casella is trying that game all the time.
The only
We're
reason I
here to
was,
talk about Vermont, the lead of Vermont, not the situation of Quebec.
I was just trying to ask a question, sir. You don't need to take offense to it, though it was not meant offensively.
Very well.
I think thank you for the question and thank you for the answer. I think it shows how easily we are all confounded with what to do with our garbage. It's not just a Vermont problem. It's not just a Quebec problem. It's a global problem. This planet of ours, as we know, is shrinking and fragile. There are examples in other countries, and I picked Sweden, I picked Taiwan, I picked South Korea. We've read how there are innovative and new programs. They're expensive, for sure, but they're high-intense heat, using waste to energy through gasification processes. There's even talk now of your solar panels at your plant in Coventry, or the methane capture. You could do electrolysis on water, separated the hydrogen atom or element, and put it into hydrogen fuel cells, and power all of your trucks silently and without a single ounce of carbon pollution. This is going on. Hydrogen fuel cells are not affected like batteries are in cold weather. I think our globe will maybe be moving in this direction within 5 years. But there are many opportunities out there to look at. Innovation is costly. To protect our environment, it's worth it. Could there be a better investment, think about it, public investment, than to protect our water supply? Gilles Belanger.
Yeah. I'm here today to listen and collaborate, but I want to say one thing. I'm representing Quebec on the Council of State Government, the ERC side, and there's representative from Vermont. I believe it's Caroline Partridge, the senator. And I'm also on the board of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River, the Watershed. And I made a proposal last summer at the ERC to propose to have Vermont as part of the GLLC caucus. And we do have all the states. We have Ontario and we have Quebec that are part of that. And I would like to take 1 minute just to read what's about, unless everybody knows about the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence. I guess no. The Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus is a binational, nonpartisan organization that exists solely for the purpose of engaging states and provinces legislators in the policy-making process related to the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River. I made a presentation demonstrating that the Champlain Lake and Memphremagog Lake are part of the watershed because they communicate through the St. Lawrence River. As the major source of water for community located within the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River are a vital resource in which the region residents all share a common interest. The caucus is organized around the guiding principle of assuring that the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River continue to provide a plentiful source of clean, affordable water to the region, resident, business, and industry. What I'm saying is there's money is really the key here. The study, and we're talking about innovative and research and all of that. When I made that proposal, it was to have the Vermont to join that team and to participate, and it was well received on the CSG side and also the GLLC. And I would like to get your opinion from the Vermont representative if you believe that that would be a plus. Because doing studies, recommendation, laws, it's very expensive. And if we have a team of Ontario, Quebec, Canada, and all the states that agree, we were talking, the last meeting in Chicago, we were talking about leachate, we were talking about PFOAs. They have the same issues, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Michigan Lake. Why not having on board the Vermont? So I think we will save some money and we will consolidate all the thinking and the resolution. So we're not here today to make proposal and resolution, but that's something I want you to be aware that I strongly recommend Vermont to be part of that. And that will generate a lot of good ideas, and we do have a great collaboration.
Thank you, Representative Belanger. Perhaps Secretary Moore or Chuck Schwer would like to respond, or anybody else. There is also, as I was listening to you, in 1909 there was a Boundary Waters Treaty between Canada and the U.S. It started in the Great Lakes, and its focus was on pollution, or the potential for pollution, even with unknown science. The principle was to take the precautionary principle. And if that pollution could harm the property or the safety or the public health on the other side of the boundary, then that automatically went to an International Joint Commission, the IJC. It is our hope with the dump group that, and this is new education for me that Representative Belanger just presented, but it sounds a similar idea, and we hope that the federal representative from Leahy's office, Senator Leahy's office, I'm sorry, I don't know you.
I'm Barry.
We hope you're listening and might take this under advisement, as well as this could come from the initiative from the state government as well.
We regularly participate in these sorts of interstate and international organizations. For example, I participate actively in the Environmental Council of States, which is the leaders of all 50 states' environmental agencies, for exactly many of the reasons you described, that there's a lot to be learned, and looking at the work being done in other jurisdictions, and certainly we would welcome this opportunity. It sounds like it may be a caucus of legislators, is that correct? And so maybe best put to some of our representatives or Senator Starr, as opposed to the agency in its executive branch capacity, but know that those opportunities are invaluable. And frankly, we regularly are consulting with other states, New York and New England states, that are also dealing with challenges related to the fluorinated compounds, to learn from their research, to help inform the way we approach research that's being done on the ground here in Vermont. And also just to have, frankly, a larger data set, because it's an emerging contaminant and one we're all actively learning about.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Senator Robert Starr from Orleans County.
Yeah, in response to the Eastern Regional Conference, Vermont plays, a very important part of that and participates in their meetings. And we have different representatives that go and represent us in different areas. And Carolyn Partridge is also the chair of the House Representatives Agricultural Committee. And I'm sure that, we're already well represented, but we could possibly talk with Carolyn and have her even promote this even further and get a resolution out of her committee that would go to the House and then on to the Senate that would help maybe our environmental agency further this international with you folks through the Eastern Regional Conference.
That's a great idea. Representative Page.
Yes, I was just going to say, a number of years ago, I believe Senator Leahy did propose that the Lake Champlain lake be designated as a Great Lake. So that may have have already happened? Can it be designated as a
Because
Great
it's,
Lake?
it's touching New York. New York is part of the GLLC, but Vermont is not. But it was well received by the CSG, that proposal. Now it's to the GLLC to introduce, to accept the Vermont, and Vermont needs to show interest.
We have ample time this morning. We'd like to ask any other questions. Yes, sir.
I have a question regarding the presentation, and I'm looking at the graphic where it is reported that the leach is present in the secondary liner. I'm a little surprised by the quantity of gallons that are found in the secondary liner. Do we know why this situation occurs?
I do not know. I think there are a variety of reasons. I only had the numbers to tell me what was in there. I do not have an explanation for how it got into the secondary liner.
So I can answer that, and if anyone from Casella could jump in too, make sure I got it right. But our staff, my staff, has been very proud. Is very diligent in monitoring the conditions at the landfill, water quality, as well as the leachate being generated. And those numbers are correct that Teresa provided, but there were clear explanations. You have a liner, and then we have a secondary liner. And to prevent material from getting into there, it's a cap. But there are times when the landfill is doing work for whatever reason, and that cap, that seal may be removed, and it's just rainwater getting in. There was no indication that it was a leak of the leachate from the primary, and it was very explainable. Casey Captain, my scientist, was like, oh yeah, that peaked on this day, and here's what was being done. So, not a leak in the primary liner. Joe, did I get that right?
Yeah, I would say you did. I think the majority is stormwater infiltration. Getting into the system through piping around the anchor trench is pretty common. And when we test the secondary and look at the analytical, it resembles stormwater more than it resembles leachate.
But I do know that there was at least one occurrence where there was no rainwater at all, and there was a high amount. So things do happen, mistakes happen. I know sometimes there's waste that is sharp, and it can poke. I don't know if it was in August of 2018 where there was no rainwater. So it's not always just rainwater, but I think that's probably the majority. I don't know.
But that is something my agency takes very seriously, and if there was a leak in the liner, it would be a bad day for us, and a bad day for Casella, and we would make sure that that was repaired. Our analysis indicated that was not the case, and therefore it was noted, but we felt confident it wasn't a leak in the primary liner.
How can we check if the second liner is not leaking?
There's an under-drain system, so we are able to also test underneath there. So it's basically a triple line because there's clay underneath that. So those are all checked.
And there's also groundwater monitoring wells that are also evaluated. And there's no indication that the landfill is leaking, zero.
And just, you know, a way to think about this based on our past, just to put it in context, Vermont had landfills in every community. They were online. Although we didn't have the leachate problem, what we had was contaminated groundwater, and many of those landfills continue to be monitored today. Much harder to control and correct versus today's modern landfills. That's not to say the leachate isn't an issue. We recognize now that we're learning more about the perfluorinated compounds, but we've tested leachate for years and years and years, and it's been relatively safe. Now we're discovering these emerging contaminants, and it's certainly something that we're concerned about. Dump is, Casella is, and the nation is in the United States as we look at what's the best way to deal with it. So we recognize leachate is a concern, but it's certainly an improvement in the way we used to manage our waste. And my agency is also very committed to trying to improve the quality of what goes into landfills. We remove tires, batteries, electronic waste, mercury-containing products. So when we think back to the old days, things were a whole lot worse, so let's not forget that. That's not to say we should turn our back on today's problems. Today's problems are real, but we still feel very strongly that these highly invested triple-line landfills are certainly a far greater way to manage our waste than what we used to do in the past, recognizing there's still challenges ahead.
Nikki Strong, representative from Albany.
Yes, I serve on the Ag Committee in our House of Representatives, and particularly related to our rainfall and the leachate issue, we're seeing a large increase in actual inches of rain per year, like 10 inches or more on average now, obviously affecting farmers and water quality on the farm, but how are you taking this into consideration, this increase in rainfall, and as we see an increase in leachate gallons, is there a plan for the future if this rainfall continues?
I mean, we are obviously keeping careful track of changes in weather patterns. Our best estimates is that over the last 40 years, the average precipitation in Vermont has increased by about 7 inches a year. Last year was particularly wet, and you're right, it was almost 10 inches above long-term average. We're also seeing an increase in the frequency of storm events that are greater than an inch in depth, so more intense rainfall. And that has design implications for a number of our programs. One of the ways the solid waste program seeks to manage that is by limiting the amount of area that's open and exposed to those rainfall conditions, and that's a tool we'll continue to use. But it's really something to be aware of and managed for. We obviously aren't going to change the amount or the rate of precipitation, and so instead it becomes a management consideration and ensuring that we're doing what we can, and that Casella is doing what they can to minimize the amount of leachate that is generated in the first place and requires treatment. And part of that's keeping clean water clean and not having it come into contact with waste.
Joe Gay, manager of Coventry.
Just to help further maybe answer that question, Representative, some of the things that Casella is doing is we are deploying an interim capping on the landfill much sooner than we've had in the past, putting plastic on the slopes, keep the rainfall away from the trash, keep the runoff clean, keep the erosion down, keep the gas in. So we have about 25 acres, round numbers, of what we call low emission capping. It's interim, it's temporary, but we place it on the slopes to help with that leachate generation of the site. And we encourage you to come to the site and get a tour, and we can show you it.
Yes, Representative Higley.
Yes, Henry. So I serve on the Energy and Technology Committee, and I guess this is an open question for anyone in the room. As you had mentioned, some other countries and even some states have trash to energy facilities. Rutland had one years ago that never went into operation. I guess on our committee, we've never discussed that. We talked about other energy sources and so on, but I guess my question is why not? What is there about today's trash to energy facilities that doesn't meet requirements, and maybe what is the cost that it would take to bring them up to those standards?
That's a great observation, I feel. Thank you. I think Robert is familiar, maybe other Canadians are. We understand in St. Hyacinthe, there is a waste to energy facility. I think that it focuses on organics more than chemicals at this point, but I could be wrong. Does anyone know about that program here? It's very innovative.
But you're right, this is for organics mainly, but they have also a lot of batteries, like Sapito and the byproduct of milks. So they produce a lot of energy with the full capacity of low gas. Low gas in the, all the gas is used for methane in the, like they use for the heating and all. So they have a good product, costs a lot, but it's a good product for all organics. But they don't treat the chemicals, just the organics.
Well, they don't treat the chemical, just the organic.
Just the organics.
Thank you very much. Even for the organic, I think it would be worthwhile for representatives to take a trip to St. Addison.
Just if I may, there is a large anaerobic digester that is coming online this spring in Salisbury, Vermont, that will, it's an on-farm project, but I believe about 2/3 of the material that will be used to feed the digester is organic food waste and other food waste. And that's a significant waste to energy project. We're actually tapped into the Vermont gas pipeline. And we'll be providing renewable natural gas. And I believe Middlebury College is the primary purchaser of the renewable natural gas generated at that facility. We believe that as we continue implementation of Act 148, which is a state law that sets up a number of different recycling requirements, by July 1st of this year, there will be a ban on organics being disposed of with waste. That it will increase the opportunities for that sort of waste to energy generation throughout Vermont.
Thank you. Peggy? I'm sorry, was there another question?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I have 3 questions for A&R. The first question is, do we have any study related to a membrane lifetime? How many years? Second is, we do talk about the PFAS, PFOAs, but what about GenX, which replacing DuPont has developed that new product, and it seems that the water treatment are not able to manage that new chemical, the GenX. And the third item is the past 20 years, it seems that there was no specific strategic plan. And the end result was expansion of Coventry. What A&R is planning, if we know that in 20 years there will be an issue about the landfill, is there an action plan for the next 20 years? What will be the end result in 20 years? Are we going to be in the same position as today, add another 50 acre or 100 acres? Or there will be a post-closing, because 20 years is long, but at the same time, it goes fast.
So I will probably defer to Chuck on number 1 and 3. It can help address number 2. PFAS are actually a very broad category of chemicals. There are literally thousands of them. Some of them are well known and some of them are less well known. Currently, our monitoring data is able to detect, I think, 18 of them is what we're testing for. GenX is a shorter carbon chain version or a shorter carbon chain PFAS compound, and it's believed to not bioaccumulate in the way the longer carbon chain members do. That said, these are emerging contaminants, and we don't have complete information, and we're continuing to learn and study. But the ones we are managing for, there are 5 PFAS compounds that make up Vermont's 20 parts per trillion health advisory. Those are the ones that there is toxicity data to indicate the potential for human health concerns, and that's why we regulate around those particular compounds. So I think your question is a good one, and I think the answer is in part the science suggests that those shorter carbon chain compounds have a lower degree of human toxicity, and yet it's an emerging area of science, and we're still very much implementing things. And then I let Chuck answer your questions about membrane lifetime as well.
Yeah, I know A&R has not done studies on membrane lifetime, but we've certainly referred to the literature. We've turned to Casella to provide us with information on that. We meet with our peers around the nation 3 times a year where that is talked about, but at this point that doesn't seem to be a concern that we have at this point. In terms of the long-term plan, we've heard a lot of that discussion in this room, talking to Dump in other meetings, and it's not something that we're actually embarked upon at the agency level. There was a study years ago about looking at state-run landfills that was dismissed as not really a viable option for Vermont. It's a small state, 600,000. We don't generate really enough trash, believe it or not, for the cost that would be required to run a state-run landfill in 4 different regions. But we do certainly, my agency takes a very aggressive role in trying to move away from the mentality of throwing everything in a hole in the ground. We really would like to get away from that. I don't envision, probably in my career, we'll see zero waste, but our goals have been each year to try to throw away less and less and create programs to make it easy and convenient to not throw things away. As I mentioned, we have a paint program, batteries, electronic waste, tires are banned. We're talking about a single-use plastic initiative where that's in the legislature now to consider options. Packaging. Ideally, we'd like to get away from the throwaway society, and our group's trying to take more of a leadership in that. But it's really talking about changing culture and society, and that's, as we all know, very difficult to do. But we're certainly trying to be on the leading edge of that and promoting it. And in 20 years, hopefully, we won't be generating the amount of tonnage that Teresa presented today. It's pretty extraordinary how much stuff we throw out.
Thank you, Chuck. I hope I can get time enough to, but first I caught the glimpse of a fellow in the corner, and he is our vice chairman of our House Natural Resources Committee, Paul LaFave, who is a representative from Brighton, just the largest town in Essex County.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up that when we passed the ban last year in the legislature, the use of plastic bags at the time that actually came out by groceries, we added a condition to that piece of legislation that requires ANR by 2021 to give us a report on the feasibility of opening 2 other landfills that have been, I believe, certified but haven't been permitted. Anyway, we're wondering, the bill requires ANR to report to us as to what the feasibility would be to open those landfills, and also the impact, the energy impact now of transporting waste from all over the state up here to the Northeast Kingdom. And I'm just wondering how far, or if there's any plans, how far the plans have developed to do that stuff.
We are aware of the requirement and communicating deadlines that have not yet we've done a lot of engagement with the feasibility required by the bill. There's another study committee that we actually participated in this looking further at single-use plastics and extended producer responsibility and prioritize our time thus far.
Is there any budget for that study?
Outside of the existing agency budget, none is provided to us now, so we'll be doing it with existing staff resources.
I saw a number of hands. Robin? I'm sorry, Madam Bennett.
Lynn.
Lynn, thank you. Good for you.
Not a problem. I do remember my name. There are other things that escape me, but my name is okay. I just have a generalized question that I'm asked a lot by my constituents. And that is, we are a very small state. We're having to expand our landfill. Why are we taking outside garbage from other states when we don't have enough for our own? Help. I want an answer that I can give.
Sure. So we don't accept outside garbage. So it's not that we wouldn't allow it, but because Vermont invests so much in recycling programs and household hazardous waste prevention program, we don't want to take garbage from outside the state that's not doing the same level of cleaning up the garbage. So what we said is if an outside entity would want to bring their garbage here, they'd have to do a solid waste implementation plan and show us that they're doing all those programs. So no other community outside Vermont has developed a plan that meets our standard. So that's a good thing. But what we do allow is special waste to come from outside Vermont, like lightly contaminated soils, some asbestos type waste that's been tested and meets all the standards. And when the graph that shows the in-state, out-of-state, we kind of look at it like it's somewhat of a wash. If we took all of Vermont's municipal solid waste, we have this amount. But we know about 20% of our waste from the southern part actually goes out of state to landfills in New York and New Hampshire. And that 20% that goes out of state is kind of made up for by the special waste. So we sort of look at it like we're really pretty balanced in that regard, but we do not take municipal solid waste from out of state.
Thank you.
First, Jillian.
Okay, I just have a follow-up question to that. I believe last spring there was a rollover on I-91 of a truck going to Casella with asbestos, and it required a hazmat team from New Hampshire to come in and clean it up, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not quite sure what standard we're talking about, because if it's that hazardous, why is Vermont allowing it to come into a small concentrated area that is directly connected to a huge watershed?
Well, asbestos is allowed to be buried in Vermont if it's a certain level of asbestos, and it has to be tested before Casella will accept it. They have to have it tested, and then we review that information. You know, asbestos, the problem with asbestos is breathing, so that's why you need a special crew to clean it up. But when it comes in the landfill and it's covered up, that it's not a groundwater issue, it's really a respiratory issue. So special wastes are evaluated. We have standards that we have to apply to, and if it meets our standards, we're allowed to say yes to it. I think Casella also has their own very strict standards, so they're not going to take waste that they believe will be a concern to the operation of the facility. And that was just unfortunate that it was an accident. You are correct that it requires special crew to clean it up.
I just think, as a private citizen, I'm not a scientist, I've lived here for a long time, that risk to me of having potential for contamination in the air or the soil or the water, we don't really know. I'm not sure why Vermont thinks that that is an acceptable risk for its citizens.
I intend to call on the representative to Ottawa from Memphremagog region, Linda sat next, but I just wanted to say, in all of our work as we did this and we evaluated the application, we kept learning from your agency that we evaluated according to the rules. I went back, and many of us went back and looked at those rules, and many were designed for municipal landfills, not a statewide landfill, prior to the year 2000. Only 3 of the 14 rules under which the application was evaluated have been updated. I plead to the Vermont legislators to look into this, to at least help the agency work together and all of us to update these rules. The stuff in landfills, as you pointed out, it was dangerous back then, but it's confounding to us now. There's no emerging, there's no definitive science which says it is safe to put into a wastewater treatment plant. What I have read, and I've talked with landfill wastewater treatment operators in Montpelier and elsewhere, and they say, no, the effluent that goes out does contain heavy metals still, some heavy metals, and certainly this new body of chemicals that persist and migrate. They're very soluble in water. They migrate fast and far. I guess we all, unfortunately, have some of them in our systems. I'm sorry to take that time. Representative Limbas from Ottawa.
Thank you.
To Ottawa.
I have two questions. First of all, I have a hard time understanding that now we're talking a lot about environment, recycling, making sure we bring less trash, and the expanded footprint of the Coventry site needs to almost be double. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense. Is it because it's the special stuff that's coming in there that needs more space? Why do we need to double? It should be becoming smaller as we grow as a community to try to produce less trash. So that's my first question. Second question is, earlier you talked about the secondary liner, about that the treatment of the leachate, and you said it was relatively safe. Is there any way that you guys test that water and that could actually be called really safe instead of relatively safe? I think that word is kind of leaves some questions. So, thank you.
So maybe I can try the first question and let Chuck take the second question. I think part of why the numbers may look different is it's an apples to oranges comparison. Historically, Vermont, as Chuck had indicated, almost every municipality had their own landfill facility, and the agency has worked hard over a number of years and even decades to reduce the number of facilities, which in turn allows there to be this high level of control, expectation, and management for the landfills that remain. As landfills have been taken offline, there's additional waste being brought to the landfills that remain. And at this point, Coventry is the last operating landfill in the state of Vermont. So part of what you're seeing is frankly a reflection of changes in the universe of disposal options within the state that have occurred over a number of years as we've moved to this much more regulated and highly managed approach to solid waste control. In terms of options for the water between the primary and secondary liner, I turn that to Chuck.
Yeah, and just let me add that the certification or permit that Casella received from us was a 10-year permit. And it's certainly our goal, if we're successful at reducing what we throw out, that cells that are planned for 10 years could maybe last 20 if we threw out less. And then it would not have to be as expanded as much. We will see. Right? You know, despite our best efforts, the last 2 years prior to 2019, we were on a downward trend for the amount of municipal solid waste we threw out. I think it's a reflection of a growing economy, but 2019 jumped back up, which I suppose is a good thing. The economy's healthy, people are good, you know, there's growth, but we still threw out more trash. In terms of the leachate, you know, it's something that we're really looking closely at. As I said before, we were testing for all the common contaminants, volatile organic, semi-volatiles, metals. The big thing was the organic matter, the BOD. So really, sending it to a wastewater treatment plant was a perfect place to take it. That was good for it. It was food for the system. But obviously, these emerging contaminants that weren't tested for in the past, and if they were, we wouldn't have been able to detect them because we're now able to measure in the parts per trillion range. So we need to remember that that is such a small amount. Again, not to diminish the potential impact, but it is so small. So now we need to figure out, you know, what's the best method for dealing with that. We've asked Casella as part of the certification to look at 2 treatment options on site and 2 treatment options off site. And we're evaluating those recommendations that came in the report to see the direction, but it's an emerging science. My sense right now is we're not quite there as a scientific community to know what's best, but we're moving in that direction, which is a really good thing. So hopefully by the 2024, when Vermont will have adopted a surface water standard, we'll have a much better sense that it is really safe, or no, it needs additional treatment. But we're not there yet.
Representative, I'm sorry, Lisette Maillet from Boston.
Thank you. Following up on what our MLA, Mr. Mélanger, is saying, is there a plan for the next 20 years? And I understand that there are a number of issues, considering the volume that comes in, the emerging contaminants and so on. But the principle of precaution, wouldn't that call for keeping the moratorium that the MCI is getting with them for the next 4 years? Would it be the safest way to go for the next 20 years and say that we don't know, the science doesn't tell us exactly what it is? We're talking about an industry that adapts much more quickly than all of us together here as consumers. And we are bound to see more and more products and variances of products that we will not have a handle on until 5 years after, 10 years after, and so on. So possibly for us, the best thing would be to stop the treatment of leachate altogether for the next 20 years and make sure that until science catches up to what the industry does, we have a relative, it's a funny word, safe water basin for all of the citizens and everybody else that uses the water. We talk about drinking water, but it's also used for many other things, and for the plant life and for the pleasance, the navigation industry and so on, where people enjoy the body of water. It's not just a matter of drinking water. So, question, can we hope for more than 4 years of moratorium, possibly 10 years or 20 years for treatment of the leachate? And I understand that it causes economic problems. I'm a mayor of a town, I know what that means. And also, and now I'm not preaching for my own parish, but not moving it from Newport to somewhere else, we're just moving the problem. We're not helping the situation in the other watershed.
I'll step in. The kind representatives from our Agency of Natural Resources have been answering very, very well. It's a global issue. If you squeeze a balloon, it's going to bubble out somewhere else. And just as you said, Lisa, I would like respectfully to turn to Casella. I would ask you, your landfills are dependent on treating your leachate in New York, wherever you have landfills. Do you feel strongly that wastewater treatment plants as designed, and do you think they're capable of treating these new emerging chemicals?
So I think it's a very fair question, Andy, and I think that first of all, I'd like to say that I really respect Mr. Benoit's 50 years of hard work in the watershed and the work that he's done, and all of you to protect the watershed. So we're working in conjunction with the Agency of Natural Resources, and the science that they have at this point in time says that there is no health risk to human or to the environment. However, we are working as hard as anyone, maybe harder than anyone, to look at different technologies to try to come up with a solution that would process the leachate and take out the PFAS, whether it's at the facility or at the municipal sewage treatment facility. If you can think about this in the right context, 2 years ago, we weren't talking about PFAS. That's why it's called an emerging contaminant. We're doing everything that we can, and I believe that the health department and the Agency of Natural Resources, in fact, is really out ahead of this. They have already set a groundwater standard. They set a groundwater standard that is 1/3 of the federal standard. Federal standard is 70 parts per trillion. The Agency of Natural Resources and the Health Department set a standard at 20 parts per trillion. So we're being held to a very significantly lower standard than Canada. And in fact, in Canada, with all due respect, please don't take this in any other manner than what the reflection of this meeting is supposed to be, which is the protection of the lake. It goes to both sides. And there are no standards on the Canadian side that Quebec has adopted an advisory. but that standard is not enforceable. And so and in addition to that, there are 3 municipal sewage treatment facilities, albeit very small, that do discharge into the lake. And we're not even measuring for PFAS on the Canadian side. Now, having said that, I'm not looking for any relief from a Casella perspective. We're going to do our job. We're going to meet our permit requirements. We're going to understand everything that we can about PFAS and the treatment of PFAS to keep it out of the environment. We're going to do our job. We've done our job for 45 years. And the notion of anything other than that is just not at all reflective of who we are as an organization, or the hundreds of employees that we have that do that hard work every day, including the driver who was injured and almost killed last week in terms of the leachate truck. And the notion that we were doing something wrong or nefarious or things of that nature is just really, we're tired of that. Let's have a real conversation about how we do a better job from an environmental perspective with regard to emerging contaminants, because next year we may very well be faced with other emerging contaminants that no one even has a clue about today. We're doing our job, and we'll continue to do that in a very positive fashion. That's my perspective about what is happening and not happening in Canada. And believe me, I do that with all due respect to everyone from Canada. But please, let's have a real discussion about protection of the water.
Jillian.
I just want to point out, as a matter of fact, that there are other states that are well below the Vermont level of 20 parts per, I believe it's trillion, and the EPA standard. So I think going back to Ms. Mayette's comment about the precautionary principle, you know, we can set arbitrary numbers. We can say it's 60 or 70 or 50 or 25, but nobody knows. So we can operate within limits. Yes, that's legal. Yes, that's prudent. Yes, that's with good intention. But the real reality is, until we know, as Ms. Mayette suggests, it might be the most safe, prudent, and intellectual and common idea to go with the precautionary principle.
Robert Benoit has a question.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question to RNA. At the Act 250 in Coventry, the question was asked about the number of trucks and what's in these trucks. We never really got the answer, except there was perhaps 35,000 trucks coming there every year. And at the end of the year, there was 52 trucks who got rejected. Now, you seem to be quite sure. When you spoke earlier, you said, we remove batteries, we remove that and that. Do we know what's coming on that side? If we remove if we reject 52 trucks after inspection out of 35,000 trucks, don't that question you a little bit? And that was at public, you know, everybody was there, they heard the answer.
Yeah, and it's a valid concern you raised. We do not have the staff to be checking every truck. I think Casella does that. I'd like them to answer it. But we do spot inspections unannounced.
We had that question at Casella. The answer I give you was in January a year ago. That's the answer we got from Casella. Now I'm asking you, not Casella. Are we better equipped now here to check these trucks coming in? We heard about the accident where it was asbestos in the truck coming to Casella. We read in magazine and newspaper about medical. All that end up in the lake one of these days. And, you know, we asking you, are we checking the truck coming in better than we did at the Act 250? They didn't even know the number of trucks coming in there when we asked. You were there, I'm sure you heard the answer.
Yeah, the answer, I'll be honest, no, we're not. I do not have the resources to have people there to check every truck. But we do monitor what's coming out of the leachate, monitor groundwater, monitoring wells. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but I want to be honest. We don't have the ability to have people there checking every truck.
Thank you.
Yes, Attaché.
Thank you. Before I ask my question, I just want to reiterate what you and Mr. Benoit mentioned at the beginning, is that it is quite unprecedented to have so many legislators and civil-minded people who are around the same table, which I think is extraordinary. And I know Madame Bigot would want me to also recognize Vermont's leadership when it comes to environmental protection. We also appreciate very much how ANR has included our comments and our concerns from the Canadian point of view in the process for a permit expansion and all of that. The question I have, it's referring to the expansion of the wayside. And I'm wondering, when you say that one day it will be possible to treat the leachate outside of the site or on site, part of the permitting process from ANR requires you to prepare a report that was produced in October. You look at two different options, on-site and off-site treatment. And I just would like to better understand the next steps in terms of, that was a requirement. Now, who gets to decide what the option is that is chosen, which is best for the environment or best for the drinking water source? And also, in the mediation agreement, one of the conditions was that the leachate would not be treated in Newport until surface water standards are established and could prove that that's safe. I'm presuming the same would be true if it's decided that the leachate would be treated on the spot of the landfill.
So we are in receipt of Casello's report about the different treatment options that are considered, and are currently in the process of hiring up a consultant to aid us in the review of that report. Because this is an area of emerging science, it means we're both learning about the science of how these constituents behave in the environment, but also how best to treat and manage them. And we know we will benefit from people with specific expertise in the management of the chlorinated compounds. That request for support is out right now, and we anticipate having somebody online to assist us with the review in the next few weeks. So beyond that, it's a little hard to say. It'll depend on the feedback we receive from those experts regarding the options that were proposed.
Is it ANR's responsibility to take the decision then based on the expert advice, or are you going to make a recommendation to Casella?
No, so we have a number of permitting requirements, and in addition to the requirements related to solid waste certification and management, we also operate what's called a pre-treatment program. And that's a program that would specifically look at if there was an on-site facility required. The type of, it would prescribe either the type of treatment or the level of treatment that would be required in order for that material to then be able to either be discharged directly or to be taken to a wastewater treatment facility for further treatment. So it would be different than the solid waste certification, the regulatory framework we would be operating under. And part of that is having a surface water quality standard so we know the level of treatment that's required to be protective of the environment and public health.
Next question from Peggy
Yes, I
Stevens.
just wanted to add here, or at least one question. I am a member of DUMP. We've all done a lot of research in the last year or so. I have looked at the technology around leachate treatment, and I am curious, I just hope that, I assume you are aware too, there are technologies available that can treat leachate for PFAS, and I don't know about other emerging contaminants, but they're very expensive, like over 30 million to build and then several millions annually to operate and manage. I think that I would like to hope that these are the types of technologies that are being looked at when we're looking at treatment options for the leachate that's produced out of the carbon-free landfill.
We're reaching the closing hour. For those who have not yet spoken, although I would like to ask on their behalf. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood when you spoke about what was being returning in Lake Memphremagog. I heard 3 municipalities are sending, they're sending their, if my understanding is their municipal wastewater, right? And it's very, very small municipalities. So to take your expression, it's comparing oranges with apples. We closed our waste management in Magog. Nous avons exigé qu'ils ferment. Nous avons refusé qu'ils s'agrandissent, and we refuse to treat the leachate at the municipal level in Magog for the same reasons we're asking you to do it in Newport. So I hate it when you compare apples with oranges. It's not the same thing at all.
That's a very important point. One last word.
Henry, if I may,
Yes.
I think, point well taken there. We've also been doing a fairly comprehensive evaluation looking at influent and effluent at a variety of wastewater treatment facilities throughout Vermont, and have found high levels at facilities that don't accept landfill leachate. So just to keep in mind, while certainly there are perfluorinated compounds in landfill leachate, it is absolutely not the only source in the environment and not the only source in municipal wastewater.
You mentioned about that study that you're going to study about the place where leachate should be treated. For the people who are not familiar with that debate, the study that Kazelov got done by engineer firm proposed that their proposition number one is Newport. And you understand the road group is very worried that their main proposition and number one proposition is Newport. So I will be very careful to give you a blessing and say, go ahead with the Kazelov proposition. That goes against what we're looking for. Obviously, financially for them, they don't have to carry the leachate. It's in the backyard. So I understand that's the favorite proposition, but it's certainly not the favorite proposition of the group down or the Canadian side.
Yeah. Just before I call on you, Robert reminded me, the motivation really of a governmental run landfill or a public landfill, as there exists in many counties in the States and probably all over Canada, is different motivation than a private corporation. And with due respect, I don't understand business real well. I've never been a businessman, but I do read that your first obligation is to your stockholders. And
would you mind me saying something about that?
yeah, we're at a late point.
Just one thing, my first obligation is to our people, and it's just that clear.
Okay.
And there's no question that the first obligation is to our people, our employees, and the last obligation is to my shareholders.
Thank you. Yes, then we have to wrap this up. Yes, Representative.
The major point here is water flow. Let's say in Quebec, we do things not as good as on the US side, but it does flow on our side and we drink it. If I have a solution, if the leachate no longer flows in Memphremagog Lake, I think we solved one of the issues. If the flow was going south, I think we wouldn't have a meeting today. At least Quebec would not be part of that. So one of the major problems is the flowing. Imagine in Quebec having a landfill where we treat leachate and it flows in Vermont. We would have meeting in Quebec.
Sure.
Yeah. So if the treatment of the leachate is, instead of 4 years, is forever, I think it's a major accomplishment. And if we can work together on solutions, because I made a proposal to my government about measuring the PFOAs and monitoring based on the result of my meetings with the GLLC. Because in Indiana, Illinois, they do spend a lot of money searching for solution on those. So let's work together and let's solve this little issue, which is flowing of the leachate in our drinking water.
Thank you, and it's a good point to end on. I would like to introduce Peggy Stevens of our group. She has a couple of, she has a summary wrap-up to make. Yeah, why don't you come here, Peggy? Meanwhile, as they're getting setting up, I I will dispense with my after comments because I want to thank you all for coming. You've been so attentive. I hope we've all learned together. I've learned a lot this morning. Thank you. It's not easy and it's not always a pleasure to think about garbage. No one wants to think about our garbage, but we have to as a society.
Can I just say a word? This coming Saturday in Magog, there will be a movie at 3 o'clock. You're all invited. It's $8 at the cinema at Magog, 3 o'clock. It's a movie which just been shown in the United States in November. Madame Maillet, Madame Lacasse, and myself resided in Boston. The name is Dark Water. It's the history of a farmer who saw his cow dying, the people in the village being sick. And the first thing they know it was PFAS. The company DuPont had to pay $700 million to settle the case in one state. And PFAS, if you don't know what it is about, I invite you to come to Magog this coming Saturday at 2 o'clock, $8.50. There is 174 seats available. We will be delighted to welcome you there.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is basically the result, okay? We've all heard, basically, most of these things talked about, okay, but I want you to take it the way you want it. We all have a concern to maintain and preserve the water quality of Lake Memphremagog. That's clear. We recognize that the fact that the lake is a drinking water source for 175,000 people, and that's just the very first concern, but it's the human concern. And that's an issue for all of us, not just people who live in Quebec. That the risks to the environment and the public health that are posed by siting as well as operations and management are critical, and they have to be strictly regulated in order to protect and preserve the air and water quality of Memphremagog and to mitigate the effects on public health and the effects on the environment. That the leachate poses the greatest threat to ground and surface water because especially it contains these contaminants of emerging concern, including PFAS. These substances, like somebody said, is just within the last few years that these have even come into the conversation around waste management, and yet they are really of the greatest concern, not to minimize others. The top 4 sources of PFAS, including industrial and firefighting waste, demolition waste, wastewater treatment facility sludge, and landfill leachate. These are the 4 primary sources. The landfill is a repository for these. Every time the wastewater treatment facility brings sludge back to Coventry, and it's trucked in from all over New England too, it's concentrated PFAS, even more so than previously. PFAS chemicals do biodegrade, but extremely slowly. They do accumulate over time, therefore. They do persist. They migrate very rapidly, which is extremely important to understand. And they do cause harm to human health, including cancers. There are maximum exposure levels that have been set now, but they continue to be lowered over time as the body of science and research expands. And we really need to be aware of that, talking about that. Also, and we have set with calculators and all of the data provided from Casella and ANR, and we have added up, literally, the number of gallons just in the last 5 years that have gone from Coventry to waste disposal treatment facilities in Newport, Montpelier, Essex, and Plattsburgh, Vermont. None of which are engineered to filter PFAS, much less any other CCs. All of these treatment facilities empty into either Lake Memphremagog or Lake Champlain. And in the last 5 years, 17,967,493 gallons. And that is a low number because there were 8 months that we didn't count because we either didn't have the data or in one case, the data was questionably high and so I didn't include that. So that number is a low number, and that number of gallons of leachate have gone into this lake in the last 5 years. So going forward, and I can't say enough how thrilled I am for all of us to be here today. And I really appreciate the comments of Mr. Belanger. I think he's talking about the fact that all of us, not just Vermont, Quebec as well, the federal governments of both countries have got to come together and begin to do some forward-looking planning, okay? We have to have an environmental vision guided by the precautionary principle that basically says, if you don't know what's going to happen, don't do it, okay? When an activity raises threats of harm to human health or the environment, precautionary measures should be taken. The intent of the International Joint Commission, the IJC, and that's why I'm really glad that you're here, Mr. Berry, because I think this is an issue that may very well be referenced perhaps by the legislature. The International Boundary Water Treaty of 1909, which sounds archaic, but it has been updated twice in the last couple of decades, says that boundary waters and waters flowing across the boundary shall not be polluted on either side to the injury of health or property on the other. And finally, I think we have come together today to say that we have a commitment to work cooperatively to achieve regulatory and legislative authority to ensure the solid waste management, and I'm not just talking about you, Chuck, including the Coventry landfill, protects and preserves clean waters in Vermont and Canada.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you all for being here. I have 1 minute. And I've had a little talk for about 3 or 4 minutes. Yes.
I wonder if I might mention that, the Vermont Department of Health really likes to look at public health through a lens of health equity. Meaning that we all have the same chance at public health. And what this really has illustrated for me as a public health professional is an active example of how populations of low socioeconomic status and opportunity are always inordinately affected by issues such as landfill siting, such as investment scandals, such as locating of prisons as well. And so I hope that we hold Flint, Michigan being a very, very powerful example in our own country, that we hold the health of our citizens, because that's why we all exist, isn't it, right? That's the compact we have for the common good, that we hold that in our hearts when we have these conversations across international borders. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to close with a quote that has guided me today from Martin Luther King. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And then there are additional 3 words that have guided me. On the bench, right over here in Pomerleau Park, it's a small pocket park, looking at the lake, there's a granite bench, and inscribed on the back of that bench are 3 words: cherish this lake. Thank you for coming.
Yes, so far.